So I think part of the reason why we've been so successful is that we didn't have an enormous amount of money at the very beginning. Like we got a small amount of money when the business first started in 2020, and we haven't put any money in since. So all the growth has been funded through positive cash flow that we've had. And it's been helpful just not having that much cash at the start of a business versus a lot of other people that were just getting cash dumped on their lap and then they ended up just spending it carelessly.
They say it's lonely at the top. They're right. But you don't have to scale your company alone. Welcome to the Scaling CEO. I'm Glenn Gao, the CEO Success Coach. On this podcast, I sit down with top performing CEOs to uncover the hidden patterns and frameworks behind their success so you can avoid common pitfalls and accelerate your company's growth. Now, on to the show. My guest today is a CEO who has done something very few people pull off in cannabis retail. He built a profitable, cash flow positive chain while most of the industry was still burning capital. This is Chris Jones, the founder and CEO of CANNABIS XPRESS. He has built a 22-store retail chain. Chris brings an uncommon mix of institutional deal experience and hands-on operating discipline. Before launching CANNABIS XPRESS, he helped execute acquisitions and strategic transactions totaling over $1 billion at Origin House, later acquired by Cresco Labs. He also built and exited a prior cannabis retail business after reaching a roughly $15 million run rate. And the detail that tells you a lot about how he operates under pressure. He's undefeated in amateur Muay Thai. Chris, welcome to the Scaling CEO. Let's talk about how you built a profitable retail machine in an industry where the odds are stacked against you.
Well, thank you for having me, Glenn. I've been following, a lot of the interviews you've done for a while, and I've always been impressed with the caliber of people you have on. So thank you for having me. This business, I've had it since September of 2020. So I've about 5 years, a little more than 5 years now. And I've, this business has really been the culmination of, all the work I've done in the past, right? Where, like trying to find capital, looking at, areas of the industry that are not saturated. I think, you and a lot of other people have seen, when cannabis, started legalization started in different states, Canada, a lot of capital was put into public markets, and a lot of, locations were just filled with huge cultivation facilities, a lot of retail stores, and I saw that happening, and I knew it was going to be happening over in Canada when it, in 2018, once the legalization kicked in. So the strategy of this business was picking small to medium-sized towns to open up my brick and mortar retail stores. So little to no competition, so I don't have to compete with people that have 10x the capital of us.
Right.
And then looking at the locations, just making sure we manage the cash flow and how much money we put into them. So we
And,
get the stores open.
and,
Yeah,
and
go
I
ahead.
wanted to jump on that point, Chris, about cash flow. In your kind of business, cash flow is king. So talk to us about the scaling decision you made to protect cash flow, because when you're growing a company, it requires cash.
Yeah, it definitely does. So I think part of the reason why we've been so successful is that we didn't have an enormous amount of money at the very beginning. Like we, got a small amount of money when the business first started in 2020, and we haven't put any money in since. So all the growth has been funded through positive cash flow that we've had. And it's been helpful just not having that much cash, at the start of a business versus a lot of other people that were just getting cash dumped on their lap and then they ended up just spending it carelessly.
Right. I think you told me a story about people like that who suddenly show up with a brand new car, and you tell us the story about your car, Chris.
Oh well, I recently changed cars, but part of being successful in business is just making sure you watch every dollar for the business of where it goes, right? So every time I open up a new store, I renegotiate all my contracts with suppliers to get them down, like even simple things like internet, my VoIP phone service, all the service providers for banking, um, you know payments, like debit, credit, all of that. So each time I open up a new store, obviously I renegotiate all those contracts to get them lower, and just looking at every single dollar that goes in and out of the business. Like for me, I especially when it comes to a car, like obviously the depreciating asset, you don't really, having a nice car obviously just looks better, but car for $1,000 or a car for $1 million still gets you to the same place. So yeah, no, I was driving a really old Honda Civic for a long time and had almost 500,000 kilometers. And I remember a bunch of times I would just drive up to the store and I would get out and people working at the store would ask me like, "Hey, where'd you park?" And I was like, "Oh, I parked there." And they're like, "Oh, we didn't see any car there." No, that's my car, right? So it really those things really help, right? I think even when I was in my younger days and I saw people that would just show up at companies I worked for and they had a lot of money, they showed up, said hi, and left. You know kind of look at them a little bit differently. So having just managing my own personal cash flow as well as been super useful. And then obviously having just not wasting money, right? So I did change the car at it was end of its life, so I had to change it. But there's just a lot of little things where you don't need to until you're actually making a significant amount of money. You should watch every dollar that's spent.
That's great. That's great for every CEO out there. Um, Tell us about when scaling in a heavily regulated market. Let's expand beyond just thinking strictly about cannabis, but for any CEOs dealing with a heavily regulated market, what is a blind side, or sorry, a blind spot you see that CEOs have when when they need to manage margins and compliance and capital and all of this makes it challenging to scale?
So I've recently expanded. So I'm in Canada. I live in Toronto. The first 14 of my stores are all in Ontario, and then I expanded to New Brunswick, so a province just east of Ontario, and they have a similar type of licensing process, but it was different in the sense that in Ontario, anyone can open up a store. You just apply, you get the license, you make sure the town, says yes to it, and it's not near a school. And then in New Brunswick, where I expanded to, licensing was different, where it was a government RFP application. So you applied, you got ranked, scored, and then if you're chosen, you're obviously ranked the highest. And I won several licenses out there. So that's where the bulk of my growth, and I guess the bulk, probably at least 50% of my revenue is now coming from New Brunswick. And I think it's just finding markets that may not be, I guess, the most attractive. Like a lot of big public companies just, they look at, in Toronto and London, New York, like they want to open up stores and businesses in the big cities because it's the most attractive for investors. But for me, I've, found, and just even listening to a lot of different podcasts and talking to business leaders, it's the kind of boring places that are, usually the best places to go long term,
Hey,
right? Where they keep making money.
look, there was a small company a long time ago that followed the same strategy, and it's called Walmart. So you're following in good footsteps. Hey, let's talk about you and Muay Thai. So this is a lot about discipline and preparation. How does this apply to business? What kind of mindset or principle from this martial art has helped you stay composed and make better decisions under pressure?
Well, I think not just Muay Thai, but any type of general exercise, right, is fundamentally important for everyone, right? Exercise obviously is a big stress reliever, and anyone running a business, there's constant pressure always, right? So exercising is obviously very important, and I try and do activities where I don't have my cell phone on me. If you're at the gym lifting weights, usually you have your cell phone on you connected to your music or whatever. But when you're doing yoga, Muay Thai, you don't have your cell phone in your pocket, right? So I think disconnecting is very important. So doing activities, exercising, that's not, you don't have the phone on you. That's important. And then obviously the training is, it's very humbling. You see Mark Zuckerberg, training BJJ, right? So
Right.
I think it's a very humbling experience when there's people who, just are better than you, right? And so that's been good. And then obviously just the mindset of being like the hard training, and then just being in a ring with someone, right? Is completely different. Well, similarities to being in business, but it's definitely been very helpful in terms of the stress reliever, good exercise, building a new community of people that I'm friends with, and just yeah, just competing. I think most people in business are competitive, right? So
Right.
I always want to win at everything I do.
I talk to my CEOs who are always working about how actually having activity outside of work, whether it's with your family or it's spiritual or it's working out or some combination
all of those makes you a better CEO when you have to come in and focus on the business because you need that ability to break away and take care of yourself to come back as a better CEO. So I really appreciate your experience here. So I want to talk a little bit more about scaling yourself as a CEO. So you had to grow from one store now to 22. So let's talk about what you had to do personally, what habits or ways of working you had to let go of as the company expanded and expanded.
I think a lot of one challenge that, like, especially for larger companies, you see different CEOs that come in at different points, right? You have a CEO that starts the company, and then you have someone that comes in at a different stage of when the company grows to then, make it bigger. So for us, it's been, there's different hats you wear at the very beginning. When you start a business, you're doing a little bit of everything, right? And then obviously as you grow, you get a little bit more disconnected from the, things that are happening day to day. And for example, in the retail business and the brick and mortar stores. So just getting a little bit disconnected from what's happening just because, the focus changes to scaling, right? So I think there's different points in time where need to start hiring people and delegating a lot of responsibilities that you're doing to other people. So going from 1 to 5 stores easy, 7 to 10 a little bit more challenging, and then after 10 you need to bring in more people just to manage all of the stores just because I couldn't focus on that stuff anymore. So there's been different junctures where you have to grow the team, and one reason why we've been successful in terms of not, having many profitable years is that we don't go and hire everyone. Like I've been to some events where I remember there was one retailer I was talking to who had one store, and he said, "Oh, come meet my team," and I said, "Oh, okay, sure, I'll come meet them." And then he said, "Oh, this is my CFO, my CMO, my person in charge of HR." I was, my legal. I was looking at them, and I was like, "You guys have one store. Like, is it doing like 100 million in sales? Like, why do you hire all your friends?" And then I kind of just jokingly laugh, but it's people like that. I think it's important to know when to start hiring an executive team and at what stage, right? Like for us, it's been doing it once we're kind of at a point where our glass is, overflowing with work versus
Right.
hiring people before we're at that stage, right? Because you still don't know what's going to happen. So, that's what I've done in terms of this business is just wait until we're at, kind of not the breaking point, but we're getting close, and then we hire someone to, take over some of that work.
Right. A very capital efficient way to grow. Let's talk about compliance for a moment. And you live in a very compliant oriented business. So, how do you combine the compliance requirements, the regulation, the licensing, et cetera, with aggressive growth? Help us understand your secret there.
So in Ontario, I think, it's like any business. Doing it the first time, opening up the first store is obviously the most difficult. So I learned a lot of those skills from the previous retail business that I started and sold around COVID. And, once you know the regulations, they don't really change that fast. I know a lot of government, obviously in the US, yesterday, Donald Trump, they're looking at the rescheduling of cannabis, but the
Right.
regulations don't really change that fast. It's pretty slow. So once you know the formula, it's easy to cut and paste. So in Ontario, opening up a couple stores was pretty seamless. And then transitioning over to New Brunswick, a different market, I had to review the regulations again. And I do have a lot of lawyers I work with, but a lot of that stuff I can review and understand myself. And I think having an open relationship, if you can, with some of the people that are in charge of the regulations is important, right? Just some of the things that potentially are proposed don't necessarily make sense in practice. So it's like the theory of why the regulations exist and the practice of it. So having open conversations with the regulators is very important during that process because there's things that they may not see until the store or business is actually operational. So in New Brunswick, I opened up the first private retail store in the province, and now I'm the largest private retailer there. So having a good relationship with them is important. And then obviously if the regulations are complicated, then consulting lawyers. But for us, I haven't necessarily had to do that as much just because I've been doing it for so long.
Yeah, it's interesting, in a completely different business, in self-driving vehicles. At one point, General Motors had a division called Cruise, and they were working well in San Francisco, but they did not have a good relationship with the regulators. And
Hmm.
they were trying to hide information from the regulators, and they eventually had to back out. And I think GM killed that entire division, all related to dealing with regulators. And so you found a secret sauce here that I appreciate you sharing. Now, Chris, on to my last topic. The favorite thing I like to talk about with CEOs is AI. So when you think about AI, we could think about how it helps scale your operations, how it might help manage inventory, might it help determine what products you need for what kind of customers and what location, or protecting your margins. So how are you thinking about AI as it fits into the future of Cannabis Express?
Yeah, AI comes up quite a bit, and I've read a lot about AI, and a lot of the companies that have invested a lot in AI haven't really seen any returns on it as
Some
of
of that's
yet.
true, yeah.
So for us, it's, since each transaction is a new line of data, I've been using it in terms of just digging through our data a lot faster. So I can easily just upload, a monthly sales report of every single transaction across every single store of the company. And I can see, is there a certain, employee that's, getting more discounts than others? Like what's our average margin on a certain type of product? What times of the day are the peak hours? Like, do we need to double up staffing during those hours, or do we need to, do we need to close down on certain days? Because some stores I've changed the hours a couple times just because customers, they stop shopping at 6 p.m. in a small town, right? And if I'm open till 8 p.m., we only see one customer. So being open 2 extra hours, we lose money.
Right.
So optimizing like the store hours is really important. Inventory management. So obviously, we have millions of inventory across all the store locations, and we don't really want to sell old inventory. So figuring out at what point do we start discounting something if it's more than 6 months old. So it saves, like we can do it, manually in Excel, just digging through or making pivot tables, but it does save a lot of time in terms of just, uploading an Excel sheet and just, asking it, hey, look at every single product that's more than 6 months old and what percent should be discounted based on, previous discounts we've done in the past to move these products. All right. So it's a
Yeah.
lot faster. So it saved us a lot of time in doing those actions. But yeah, AI obviously is very important for, cannabis retailers or retailers in general. But that's pretty much what I use it for right now.
Well, one of the things I predict for you, because you have 22 stores and you have, I don't even know how many transactions you have per day, but you have a large database of transactions.
Yeah.
Um, AI is going to start to see patterns that humans can't see because you can't look at all the data. And by querying AI to look for certain patterns, things are going to emerge that are going to help you run your business more efficiently. So I'm really looking forward to um, hearing about that when you take advantage of all the data you have. So, Chris, we are all done for today. So, how can people find you if you want people to reach out to you?
They can go on the website. There's a general email inbox for the corporate email, or on LinkedIn. They can just type in Chris Jones cannabis. It always comes up pretty high on the list.
Awesome.
So
Awesome. Chris, thank you. Really appreciate you joining us today.
yeah, thank you very much, Glenn. I appreciate it too.
That's a wrap for today's episode of The Scaling CEO. If you found this valuable, be sure to like, subscribe, and share with a fellow CEO who could benefit. If you're listening on Apple or Spotify, please give us a quick rating as it really helps more people find the show. I'm Glenn Gao, the CEO Success Coach. See you next time for more proven strategies to grow your business and leadership.